This is Sandy Derrick from Watertown, Tennessee, and you're watching Takeover TV.
What is up, friends? Takeover peeps. Random person coming across this video. However you got here, I'm happy to have you. We're here for another weekly wrap-up. It's been a good week so far. I had a good weekend. We're off an exciting weekend that was full of football stuff. It was the NFL draft. We'll get into more of that later, but that's always a really fun time for me. It's honestly probably one of my most favorite sports events that there are. I would argue that I have as much fun watching the NFL draft, if not more, than even watching the Super Bowl. Of course, that changes if one of my favorite teams is in the Super Bowl, but in general, the draft is just so much fun for me. I watched the first round, a little bit of the second round, and then had the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh on in the background. Pizza and wings by my side for the first round. Couldn't be back in Minneapolis with my friends for that. They were at Buffalo Wild Wings watching it, doing the usual thing that we do, so I kind of carried it on, having my own version of that back home in Florida. My daughter's school put on a May Day celebration, which is really cool, going and seeing them do that. She actually won May Day Queen for her school, which was really awesome to see, and I was super proud of her. Speaking of my daughter, her and I dropped a new taste test video this past weekend. We did Pringles, so make sure when you're done watching this to go watch that and find out what we liked out of the batch of Pringles that we tasted most recently. I started playing bass guitar a little bit again. I mean, once guitar player, always a guitar player, but I started actually practicing again, which is a big piece of actually being good at your instrument. So I've been pulling on my bass, practicing a little bit each day. What happened was, so I left one of my basses back in Minneapolis because that's where my current band is located, so it just makes sense when I'm back there. I can easily do things with them. But I brought one of my older basses that I haven't really used in years. It was actually one of my earliest touring bass guitars that I had in my first two bands. And I guess I hadn't opened it in a long time, but I brought it here to Florida with me. So that's what I've been practicing at. And I found an ancient relic of 2006, maybe. Some like sheet music, basically. It's like us writing out notes to the chords that were in some early demos. I think I actually know exactly which ones these are. Remembering how to play them is a whole different story. But that was really cool. That's like a piece of historical memorabilia for me personally. Also, if you remember one of my old weekly wrap-ups, I talked about the brown thrasher being... That was my Stuff That Slaps segment. And I was talking about how I've been looking one forever since I was a kid, and haven't been able to find one, and how they're pretty hard to find. And I had a bird watching friend who's much older than me, and he's only seen two. I found one the other day. I couldn't believe it. We were actually outside of where my daughter has choir, and we were there to pick her up, and there was this bird singing, and it was a long song, and I kind of thought nothing of it. I was like, oh, that's a beautiful song, and it was really loud, though. And I thought more and more about it, and I was like, that sounds a little bit like the main song the brown thrasher sings. So then I peeked in this like brush shrubbery thing, and sure enough, I saw the tail. I would have loved to like get a video or a photo for you guys. It ended up hopping out and going on a roof, which then I could see it in its full glory, and that confirmed it for me. But I was just taking in the moment. It was so surreal to me and so awesome and so amazing. I couldn't believe that I found one, and now I am so hungry to find another one. So I'll be on that search. But with that, let's get into this weekly wrap up. Enough about me. Question of the day. I'm always giving you music suggestions. Why don't you give me some music suggestions? Have you been listening to any good music lately? If there's anything you've really liked, I would love to add it to my repertoire of what I listen to, so I'm not just listening to the same things over and over. Drop the artist name and a song in the comments. Let's get into some football news. Like I said, it was just the NFL draft. A very exciting time for NFL football fans. We got to see our teams pick guys that we were either really excited about or not so excited about, or maybe we knew nothing about them, but now we've gone and watched their YouTube highlight videos, and we think they're the best player ever, and that we did the best job drafting, and that it's Super Bowl homeboy the whole way through. We saw a run of QBs get drafted right off the bat, which was pretty expected. Bryce Young went first overall to the Carolina Panthers. CJ Stroud went second overall to the Houston Texans. Then the Houston Texans actually traded back up and drafted Will Anderson out of Alabama, a stud linebacker, to add to their team. Anthony Richardson went 4th overall to the Colts. That was a guy that I was kind of hoping would slip. I heard rumors that if he had gone like 6th or more, the Vikings might have traded up and tried to get him. Star running back Bijan Robinson out of Texas landed with the Falcons 8th overall. And Jalen Carter, the defensive player who was in mock drafts, they had him going number 1 overall for a long time. He landed with the Philadelphia Eagles 9th overall. The Lions entered a new chapter at running back. They drafted Jamar Gibbs out of Alabama in the first round. They would later trade DeAndre Swift to the Philadelphia Eagles. And as we know, they let Jamal Williams walk. Speaking of the Eagles, they really like the University of Georgia. I mean, really. They drafted 3 from that college. And I think they also drafted 2 or 3 the year before that. They're just stacking them up. Oh, and remember how they traded for DeAndre Swift from the Lions? Guess where he went to college? He went to the University of Georgia. I feel like there weren't a ton of surprises in this draft. It kind of went as expected. Maybe some guys got drafted a little sooner, but across the board, a lot of mocks I was looking at, they ended up still with the same teams that people thought they would. There wasn't any like huge trades up to get anyone really, or like blockbuster trades in day one kind of deal. Nothing like when AJ Brown went to the Eagles last year, stuff like that. I guess the biggest surprise was watching how far Will Levis fell. There were murmurs of him like climbing the board at the last second. It turns out maybe he was saying stuff about thinking he was number 1 overall, having intel on that. He ended up slipping out of the first round. He did end up getting selected by the Tennessee Titans in the second round eventually. As for my personal teams, I was very pleased with the Ravens getting Zay Flowers to add another weapon for Lamar Jackson. And they added some pretty good defensive pieces as well. The Vikings, though, kind of confused me. They drafted Jordan Addison in the first round, and while he's a very exciting, very talented receiver and will be a good 1-2 punch along with Justin Jefferson, there's some very clear defensive needs for the Minnesota Vikings that they did not fill early on. They did draft some of those positions later rounds, but I thought for sure they'd go hard on those in the first round or try to get a QB. And here's the thing. They waited till the 5th round to get a QB, so it's clear that they still are not sure what's happening after Kirk Cousins in the future, and that's bothering me a lot. What about you? What did you like about the draft? What did you like about what your favorite teams did? What did you not like about what your favorite teams did? Let me know in the comments. As for basketball, we are now in the next round of the NBA playoffs. We had some games last night as I was filming this or whatever, so we kind of know how things are going further. But right now we're down to some core teams. We've got the Sixers and the Celtics up against each other, the Suns and the Nuggets, the Heat and the Knicks, and the Lakers and the Warriors facing off. And in my opinion, these are all fantastic matchups, and they're games that I want to tune into and see what happens. Side note, Jimmy Butler is a playoff beast. Sports card news. A new Netflix show just released this past weekend, Friday to be exact, and it follows Ken Golden's auction house, his team, and all the things they have going on. It's called The Golden Touch. I personally like these kinds of shows, but I'm kind of a sucker for like the reality show stuff. I like things like Selling Sunset. I like Pawn Stars. I like American Pickers, especially when they're in collectibles, things like that. But I kind of like the like trashy reality stuff. It wasn't really like trash reality, but it had like doses of, like heightened drama and things like that. It wasn't my absolute favorite show of this kind of genre, and there were some things that like I'm sure sports card hobby people will find to complain about in it, and that's fine. But it is still cool seeing an industry that a lot of us are in, including myself, be represented in the mainstream. I still thought that was really cool. It brings more eyes to the hobby, it brings more attention and all that. And I know for some people that's a problem, but I've made videos about this before about gatekeeping the hobby, and you can go watch that if that's something you're worried about. Maybe I'll make a fresh new video coming off of this about that. Not going to get into that today. Overall, I thought this was a good thing for the industry. One of my favorite parts of the show was towards the end. This is not a spoiler because it's not a story, but Karl Malone shows us his personal collection. It's his USA Dream Team. He had a jersey of himself and all of his teammates on that dream team and signed game jerseys kind of in a glass case, down a walkway that you could. It was one of the coolest things I've seen. I would love to see it in person. I'd love to own it, but that's not going to happen. But that was so cool. I thought that was amazing. Speaking of sports cards in the mainstream, we received info, not most recently, but it kind of bubbled up again. But Adam Sandler is working on a movie that follows the high-end sports card industry and trade and collecting of that. He's making that movie with the same people that he did Uncut Gems with. We'll talk about that more as more info comes out. We don't have a lot so far, but I'm really interested in hearing more, and I'll watch it when it comes out. Video game news. I officially made it 1% further in the game Metroid Prime on GameCube. I found the charged gun. Sorry, I found the charged beam. I don't even know what I found in Metroid Prime. 1% further. Actually, that's not the video game news. That'd be really lame. I do have some video game related news though. The Super Mario theme song. Yes, you know which one I'm talking about. It's already in your head. It's officially titled Ground Theme, and it is being inducted into the Library of Congress. This is the first video game music ever to be inducted. You might not have even known the music gets inducted into the Library of Congress, and now you might be wondering what kind of music even usually does get inducted in there. Well, you can go online and see what's on there, but as a little bit of a taste, this song is being inducted at the same time as songs like Mariah Carey's song All I Want for Christmas Is You, Madonna's Like a Virgin, and Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, just to name a few. So it is alongside some music goats. Stuff that slaps. This week's slapper is the speeder bikes from Star Wars, mainly that one awesome chase scene in Return of the Jedi. I remember loving the movie The Return of the Jedi as a kid. Of course, it's this first Star Wars that my parents ever showed me. They showed it to me. They had recorded it off of TV on a VHS or something like that. So it had the lines running through it and it had all these old commercials. And I was infatuated with that. I actually prefer to watch it that way. So I looked it up on YouTube one time to see if anyone else had recorded it off of TV back in the day. And I found it, and I love watching it that way compared to really cleanly on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever, what have you. Anyways, that's besides the point. Speeder bikes rule. That scene where they're going up against the scout troopers through the forest of Endor, just speeding through, knocking them off the bikes. I think it's Princess Leia and Luke on the speeder bikes. That's epic. I used to run through my house hallways pretending to be on one. I had this little micro machine toy of one of those I used to play with endlessly. And anytime I can find them in a Star Wars video game, I try to hop on one of those and I just ride it around for a joyride. Could you imagine if we had those in real life? I mean, it would be terribly dangerous, but super awesome. Anyways, speeder bikes from Star Wars, mainly Return of the Jedi, certified slapper. Music picks time. My first pick of this week is the album Somewhere Nowhere by the band 100th. This album is a fun listen. Released by the band 100th in 2020, it continues their turn away from the original roots that the band had as their foundation. The band hails from South Carolina and started as a melodic hardcore band, pretty heavy throughout their earliest albums. However, in 2017, with an album that dropped, they started to slightly turn away from that genre. On Somewhere Nowhere, they play this blend of dreamy pop and shoegaze, a style that's layered with echoes and reverb, and it truly feels like I'm floating in a dream when I listen to it. Some good tracks to dip your toes in with them would be Out of Sight, Bottle It Up, and the song Burn It Slow. They also do some really cool covers if you dive into their discography. They do a sweet cover of the Postal Service. They do a really good one of Radiohead, one of my favorite Radiohead songs, in fact. And if you want to hear a taste of what they started as, the hardcore band, go and listen to the song Weathered Town off their Let Go album. My second music pick of this week is a band called Terminal. Terminal was a band that had way too short of a run. They signed to Tooth and Nail Records in 2004 and released their first ever and only album, How the Lonely Keep, in 2005. They then disbanded in 2006. Former members went on to join pretty cool bands though. One joined As Cities Burn, one joined Alive in Wild Paint, and one or two joined Oh Sleeper as well. When How the Lonely Keep dropped, it received rave reviews from folks. Absolute Punk called the album one of the great emo releases of the 2000s. And in another review, the band was compared to other great bands like Jimmy Eat World, Anberlin, and Third Eye Blind. I have 3 songs for you to listen to off of this one and only album by Terminal. Listen to the song Wisher, then listen to the song Dark, and then listen to the song Just a Failure. Those are my music picks for this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, friends. I will be back next week for another weekly wrap-up. Also, a different video drops this weekend. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. That helps me out a lot with the algorithm on YouTube, and also keep showing you these videos if you're interested in them. Thanks for hanging out. Peace and love.